get by. It resides between my eyes. Walk through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ali Mirza of Rose Garden, rosegardenconsulting.com. Ali, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out before I formally introduce you. And this is part of the top agency series, because what Ali really does, he's a specialist. I'm going to, kind of go more in depth in this in helping sales teams and helping companies grow ultimately. And he really helps a lot of agencies do this. So some of the top agency one I did was actually Scott Scully. Scott Scully, founder and CEO of Abstract Marketing Group. They do B2B lead generation, and he's been doing it for many years. Really successful company. That was a great interview with Scott. Also another one is Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey helps pair private equity with agencies and actually help sell agencies. And he's got the Second Bite podcast because he finds sometimes those companies sell more for the second bite than they do on the first because of the private equity landscape. So we talked about valuation. I just actually did an interview with them. They don't work with companies that are less than $1 million of EBITDA, typically. So $1 million or more. I mean, there's been some exceptions there, but most of the time that's the case. So that was an interesting one. Also, Kevin Hurrigan. Kevin Hurrigan has had an agency since 1995. He runs Spinutech, and he talked about kind of just the ever-changing landscape of business, the internet, and the agency world since that time. So those are good ones to check out. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And what do? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We are an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, which is the most important, the accountability, and the full execution. Ali, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Ali Mirza. He's a sales expert who's personally closed over $400 million and has consulted with hundreds of agencies, 18 of them actually achieving Inc. 500 fastest growing companies. 3 of those have been acquired. His work's been published all over the place, Forbes, Business Insider, and more. He has actually 2 books, Predictable Closing and Radical Leadership. He's CEO of Rose Garden, which I mentioned. Rose Garden is a nationally recognized consulting group of strategists for 7- and 8-figure founders looking to ignite their revenue by scaling their sales teams. And they've helped hundreds of organizations, from founder-led sales teams to SMBs with senior level sales leaders. And basically, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they help really build and improve your sales team. They also help increase close ratio, average deal value, and much more. He formerly served as CRO of a digital marketing agency that went from 2.5 million to over 40 million in his tenure. Ali, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. You made me sound so good. I'm a little impressed by myself. I don't. Thank you for that intro. It was wonderful.
I could be your wing person. I'll just show up wherever you are, and I'll just read that off.
I did not know you knew my boy Kevin. Kevin's actually a friend of mine. We've worked together. So
Kevin Hurrigan.
Yeah, I did not know you knew Kevin from Spinutech. Yeah, interesting. Small world.
Fantastic guy. Small, very small.
Yeah.
So just start off with Rose Garden and what you do.
We help organizations build and scale their sales teams. So a lot of times we'll walk into organizations where, the founder is the best salesperson, regardless of whether they're the only salesperson or they've got a few, but they're typically bringing in majority of the revenue, or they have someone that brings in revenue, but it's not systematic, it's not predictable, it's not scalable or repeatable. And so what we do is we come in, we'll analyze, okay, what's working, what's not working, what's not being done that needs to be done. And from there, we'll actually build out systems, processes, playbooks, scripts, all the strategy for how do we go about building a machine that is repeatable, scalable, and all that jazz. So systematically, we know which humans to hire, what to tell them to do exactly, and then how to gauge their performance and success so that we can hold them accountable appropriately, but then ensure that they're producing revenue. Sales is the only is the only department that's on the good side of the income statement. And so everyone else needs to be supported by the sales team. And so if your sales team's not predictably generating revenue, profitable revenue, then you've got to, I don't know, maybe you got to hustle at best, but it's not a business.
What are the things people are calling you about, the issues in their company? Is it a leader that's like, I can't do this anymore, like all my time? Like what are the pain points they're hitting by the time they call you?
I think it really is just they are either frustrated or exhausted with that hamster wheel, that grind of constantly having to chase that next dollar, that next deal, and not having any comfort as to where it's coming from. Or once they've sourced it, not really having any understanding of the likelihood of close, right? It's just a hope. If we put out enough proposals, if we answer enough RFPs, if we talk to enough people, go to enough trade shows, networking events, tap my network, my Vistage group, my EO group enough times, something will shake out. But they don't have that understanding, that intentionality of, X number of reps at it will likely equate to X number of dollars. They don't have that understanding. And so once they're finally willing to accept that maybe there's a better way, and that does not have to be their reality, that's kind of where our conversations will start. If you haven't come to that understanding yet, or you're, still want to play hero ball and throw it on your back and then say, no, I'll figure it out, then usually there's not much of a conversation to have at that point.
What do you find is holding those people back?
What
from founder-led sales?
It's one thing and one thing only, and everything else is diversion or confusion. It's themselves. It's their own ego. It's the day you can get over yourself and realize that there might be a better way is the day you'll start looking for the solution. Because until then, you're only looking for the problems that confirm why you are the only one that can do it, and will be the only one that will be able to do it. So, I mean, is
sometimes, do you feel, is it taking a leap from because it's an investment, right?
No,
no,
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I mean, well, first of all, everything's an investment, yes. And so once you move forward with doing it, yes, it's an investment. But the reality is what are we considering, right? And the answer is nothing. So it takes nothing to think through what could be the potential solution, and actually be honest with yourself. It takes nothing. All that time you spend, scrolling Instagram, all that time you spend in traffic, all that time you spend doing nothing, right? You could just pontificate on what would great look like, and what might success look like. And once you start doing that, you understand it's not that complicated. Then from there, once you have that understanding and you have that, it's still not assurance yet, but it's just an understanding, and some level of knowledge of where you're going, and that clarity, that in itself is quite reassuring and actually lessens the risk. The reality is most of these founders, again, because of their ego, refuse to believe that there's a better way, want to continue to tell themselves these comforting lies that make themselves feel good, and then refuse to actually explore potential opportunities. Then at that point, yes, because you haven't explored what it could look like, so you're not aware, then yes, it feels like a gamble because you're wildly unaware and ignorant to what the actual solutions could be. Because I mean, it's how has every other industry been able to figure it out? How have other agencies been able to figure it out? Are you going to sit here and tell me that they had some magical beans that you're just not privy to? I don't know. Well, if that's, you know what, if you believe that, I've got some magical beans to sell you. But outside of that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Do you think there's some fear though involved? Like no one can sell, let's say the founder's thinking, no one could sell as good as I can. I'm fearful if I bring someone in, then we won't get the sales.
So I could go very esoteric with that question. And I don't think it's fear of that. I think it's fear of I won't be, you know, worthy of a gold star anymore. Because it is like, how do you know that to be the case? Right? Like, okay, so let's play this out, right? Okay, so my fear is that I'm going to hire somebody and they're not going to be able to sell as well as I am. And I'm just going to hand over everything to them and we're going to lose millions of dollars. Okay. How would that happen? Why would that happen? Why would you hire somebody that is an unknown quantity and then turn over everything over to them? That sounds ridiculous. And if you're going to do that, I mean, that's just a bad idea and you deserve what's coming to you. So if you actually play it out, you hire somebody, you go through a systematic process of trying to understand who you should hire. Then from there, understanding how you should ramp them and how should you slowly piece business off to them until they're slowly, because there's levels to this, right? And so until they're slowly able to edge up level by level by level by level. And of course, they're going to make mistakes. And of course, from day one, they're not going to be as good as you. But, you know, if they can consistently produce revenue, because what I've found with a lot of founders is Q1, if Q4 of the previous year was bad, Q1 of the current year will be great. But then Q2 and potentially Q3 will be bad because now you're no longer generating revenue. Now you're servicing said revenue. And then you start to feel a dip and now you start to generate revenue again, right? So you'll either have a quarter on, quarter off, or quarter on, 2 quarters off, depending on how good that previous quarter was. And so let's just say that a great quarter for you could look like $5 million, $1 million in net new revenue. Okay. And what does a great quarter look like for a junior rep? I don't know. Let's call it $500,000. Okay, yeah, they're half as good as you, but you get that $500,000 consistently. At the end of the year, they produce equally as much as you produced $1 million in quarter 1 and $1 million in quarter 4. This junior rep, this person that's not as good as you, allegedly, produced $500,000 every single quarter. At the end of the year, you're in the same spot. Number one. Number two, if you allow for that, what did you accomplish with your freed up time? Number three, and probably more importantly, we can go and get 5 of those little guys. And now we got 10 million. And it's just like, okay, yeah, that sounds like I know there's going to be someone saying like, okay, yeah, that sounds great, but it doesn't work that way, blah, blah. Yeah. Tell yourself whatever you want. Okay. And then they say, well, my answer to these people is always the same. No. You can't do it. So get out of the way and let somebody else who can do it, right? Just because you haven't figured it out, that's okay. You've got a gift somewhere else. Go focus on that, right? You know who Maria Forleo is, right? She's great. She says the rule of figure outable, right? Rule number 1, everything is figure outable. Rule number 2, if something is not figure outable, it's a fact. Stop arguing with it. Rule number 3, if it's figure outable, but just not for you, maybe you just need to understand that it's just not your passion and someone else can figure it out, just not for you to figure out, right? But then you need to step out of the way and let somebody else figure it out. Sales is figure outable. So just, that's what I'll say about that.
I start there because I feel like there's a lot of mindset stuff, and I'm sure people come to you with certain, I don't know what you call it, baggage or past thoughts on this topic. And it's just their own perception of this, right? And what place do you think an agency needs to be at from a revenue, whatever metric you deem proper to start to get out of founder-led sales?
So a lot of it, so that's asking me like how long is a piece of string, but I'll try my best. Because a lot of it depends on if you got an exit and you're sitting on trust fund money or a daddy's money, or you're just sitting on a couple $1 million of cash, right? So there's that outlier. Most of us are not in that situation. There's also the profitability of how clean you run your operation, right? For someone, they could probably start thinking about getting out of sales at 3 million in revenue if they're running a clean outfit. But for some people, 7 million is not enough. Because they got 7 ex-wives that they are hemorrhaging money, and from there they got boat payments, et cetera, et cetera. And so they, at the end of the year, they got nothing left over. So it just depends. So first of all, you have to find some path of profitability first. Once you have profit, now you take those profits and you reinvest it into the organization by ways of increasing the revenue through a salesperson. So that would be kind of the first thing that I'd look at. And what I've found, if you're running a relatively clean agency, the starting point is around the $3 million mark is when you can start looking to get out of the sales. Again, I'll say this: if at the $5 to $7 million mark, you cannot afford to get out of the sales yet, you're doing something wrong. You're either too cheap or you're hemorrhaging money. Something's wrong, is what I would say. But again, I'm not anyone's money manager. So.
Well, I asked that too, because let's say someone is like, oh, listen, I'm at $1 million. I want to get out of sales. And you may go, listen, call me when you're at 3 million. At what point does it make sense?
Yeah, I would just simply say correct. I mean, I think at $1 million, if you want to get out of sales, I mean, that's a bigger or a different problem, because you're trying to get out of sales because you dislike it so much. And then at that point, if you're the founder and CEO, is that the right role for you? Because at the end of the day, as a CEO, you're always going to be selling. It's just, the entire revenue growth of the business just shouldn't be on your back at some point. But I do think you're trying to dip too early if you're at $1 million. And that tells me it's, bigger systemic problems, especially if you come to me with the mindset of, hey, I'm at $600,000 a year or $1 million or $1.5 million, and I'm trying to make this passive income. Oh boy, that's a bad idea.
You've helped a lot of agency owners, and so I'd love to hear some of the things what agency owners should start doing and what agency owners should stop doing. I'll let you start with whichever one you think we should start with, either whether they should start doing or stop doing.
Let's go with what they should stop doing. That always gets me going a lot more. Stop making excuses for your people. I think one of the biggest things that I've realized, especially as of late, is people don't want to objectively look at the performance of the individuals they have on their team. And they seem to think that you got one brush that you're going to paint an individual with. And there's a lot of leaders that feel very guilty when they have to be realistic. And because they'll have an individual on their team that they like, but this individual is not committed. This individual is a good person, great person socially, outside of, nice person. You like them as a friend, but they're not committed to your goals. They're not efficient in their work, and they're not producing results. But because you like them as a person, you refuse to look at those things and address them accordingly. Or maybe this person is a good person and they are committed, but they're not efficient and they're not producing results. Or maybe this person's a good person. Maybe they are committed. Maybe they're very efficient, but they're not achieving the results. And at Rose Garden, you're measured against one question only, is did you achieve the necessary results? Because if not, very little else matters. We can talk about the other things after, because they are important. How you got there is important. But if you didn't even get there, then we got to first figure that part out. So the results. And so when we sit there and I talk to people and I ask leaders, it's like, what's going on with this person? Oh, great person. I love Jeremy. Jeremy's just a great individual. I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care about Jeremy. I'm trying to figure out, what is Jeremy producing? Did you hire Jeremy as a salesperson because you liked him? Or did you hire Jeremy as a salesperson because you needed Jeremy to produce revenue? And 9 times out of 10, you find out they hired Jeremy because they liked him, right? They had the job opening because they needed revenue produced, but they hired Jeremy because they liked Jeremy. And now they refuse to and feel guilty in addressing Jeremy's performance, because they feel like if they address Jeremy's performance realistically, somehow that's an indictment on his character and that he's a bad person. It's not true. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the reality is if Jeremy was a bad person, he wouldn't still be here. The reason why Jeremy still continues to exist is because he's a good person. But how are we being good leaders? By allowing Jeremy to not produce results. Do you think Jeremy is happy with his results? No, he's looking at you as leadership to guide him, and you are refusing to. You are shirking your responsibilities. And so I think that becomes a real problem that a lot of leaders now need to face. Is they need to stop babying people, because your business can no longer afford it. Not in this market. Not in this market where everyone's budgets are getting slashed. People are losing accounts left, right, and center. Net new revenue growth is at an all-time low. You cannot afford to keep people on staff just because they're nice people, because you know what? How is this fair to the other people whose job isn't revenue generation, but is dependent on Jeremy bringing in net new revenue? What are you going to say to them when you got to lay them off? How you think do you really think that you're being responsible? Because the first person that the first person that you serve is your business, because the business is a living, breathing thing. And if you're not serving that person, you are not doing the right thing. So to me, again, it's not about firing Jeremy. It's about looking at Jeremy realistically. Okay, Jeremy's a nice person. Jeremy is committed. Jeremy is efficient. Maybe he's not that efficient, but we need to make him a little bit more efficient. But Jeremy's not producing the results. Okay, now that we have addressed it and looked at the reality of the situation, now we can begin to solve it. But people can't start solving problems until they look at what the actual problem is. But they refuse to look at the problem because, again, like I said, they somehow believe it to be an indictment on the individual, and they feel guilty about that. What you really should be feeling guilty about is murdering your own company, because that's what you're doing. Because there's a lot of agencies going bankrupt right now because they chose to keep a lot of nice people on staff and not have appropriate direct conversations with them. And again, I'm not talking about firing Jeremy because he's a nice person. I'm talking about having an appropriate conversation and helping Jeremy produce results by being honest with yourself and then with him. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I love hearing your thought process on that. And so one thing agency owners should stop doing is really, they're not objectively looking at these things. But I want to talk about if there's anything else they should stop doing. But on that topic, it sounds like there's failure points from the sales leaders in that situation. So what are some of the mistakes that the sales leaders are making with that particular sale or with the sales team?
Several. One, they don't have clearly defined processes, and expectations aren't clearly set, right? In terms of what does great look like, right? What are the goals? What are the milestones to getting to the goals? What are the activities that must be present, devoid of achieving said result or not? And the how we go about doing it. And then having that clearly understood in a very strategic and intentional fashion. I think that you and I are both basketball fans. You're familiar with the shot, the floater, right? Tony Parker made it quite famous, right? The floater is technically a bad shot, right? Is because it's a lower percentage shot for most people. Is because you control the trajectory of the ball to the apex of the arc, right? And then you allow gravity to do the rest. You let Jesus take the wheel, right? Gravity in that situation, and it controls it to the rest of the rim, the remainder of the arc, or the remaining 50%. It's a bad shot. And when you actually shoot a 3-pointer, you don't shoot a floater, right? You control the trajectory all the way to the back of the rim, and that thus making it a higher percentage shot because you have more control over it. Sales is no different, right? So whether it be sales itself or sales leadership, too many people float sales and sales leadership. They say, let me give you the information. Let you do your own thing, right? You're floating and shirking your responsibilities. To me, you have to control it through and through, because once you create that control, you institute it and you hold the individuals accountable for enough of it. It creates that muscle memory. It creates that pattern of what an appropriate way to do it is. If you got 10 lunatics doing 10 separate things, you will never have any control. You will never have any predictability, right? Versus if I, as a leader, sales leader, want to control my team and want them producing results, I have to tell them what they have to do. because I should know what they should be doing. If I'm going to hire a bunch of people and I don't know what they're supposed to be doing, how can they ever look at me for guidance? They can't. So that's where sales leadership a lot of times is failing, is they'll hire people, they'll let them do whatever they want. They'll say, oh, I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he was telling me, he's like, oh, I've got this young guy in Miami, really good looking guy. He, XYZ is responsible for net new revenue. I'm like, oh, okay, what does he do all day long? He's like, oh, he's down there. He's got a lot of networks. He's got a lot of connections. He knows a lot of people. He's just one of those guys that knows a lot of people. And I'm like, I get that. Like, what does he do? He's like, oh, he gets after it. I'm like, what does he do? And he's like, oh, he pounds the pavement. I'm like, so, okay, so you're telling me he walks outside every single day and he punches the concrete? Because if he's doing that, I strongly suggest you should stop. And then he's like, oh, I guess I don't know what he does. I'm like, okay, that's the reality. Okay, now that we've gotten to some point of honesty with ourselves, okay, now we can build up from there. Okay, you don't know what he does all day long. That's okay. Let's start trying to figure it out, right? And I think that a lot of times when we actually sit down and look at what our people are doing on a day-to-day basis, we find out how open their schedules really are. Because there's a lot of people. I was in a meeting the other day up in Connecticut with an organization, and their sales guy, I've got the CEO who is managing the sales guy, and I've got the CEO and the chief marketing officer both in the room, and the sales guy's not in the room. And I asked the CEO, like, okay, well, what's taking up this individual's time? And he's telling me, oh, he spends this much time doing this much time doing this. He spends about 5 hours a week on the marketing stuff. And then the CMO perks up and goes, whoa, what? And then he's just like, how much time did you just say? And he said about 5 hours. That's what Mike tells me. He spends about 5 hours a week doing some marketing liaison. And then the CMO is just like, Mike shows up to the marketing meetings. He's only there just so he's in the loop. It's a 30-minute meeting. He contributes nothing. He never has any action items out of it. That's what's happening. You get these people who are like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. That's where they're hiding, and that's where you're losing your money. I'm not sitting here telling you that all your people are stealing and robbing you blind. What I'm telling you is that guy, Mike, very nice guy, well-intentioned. But what we don't realize is the stuff we tell him to do, what is the mental load and fatigue it actually places on him, right? Now, we all know that Mike's, phoning it in, right? But it probably is taking up at least 2 hours mentally of his time, whatever he thinks he needs to prep beforehand and afterwards and whatever to come in there just in the event that he's called on, right? Because he brings in his pipeline and he preps for it specifically, I guess, for the marketing meeting and to never be called on, but it's wasting time. It's things like that that are killing organizations. Figure out what your people are supposed to be doing and just let them do that.
So, Elise, so from a sales leader perspective, let me see if I have this straight, right? From mistakes wise, no expectations,
Yep.
No real goals, no real milestones, not knowing what the activity is, and not objectively looking at the salespeople. There's an accountability issue, can be an accountability issue, and maybe a no process issue.
Yes.
Anything else that I'm missing from a mistakes that sales leaders make that they may not even realize they're making?
Yeah. No, those are excellent takeaways, actually.
Right.
The only other thing that I would say to add to that would be is, very quickly we can become very disillusioned and tell ourselves, well, I've given my people goals. But just be honest with yourself. Are those SMART goals quantifiable in any sort of meaningful way? And, will those goals actually help you get to your end outcome? And then how are you tracking them and measuring them on a weekly basis from an activities and a results standpoint? And then how are you holding your team accountable, and where's that feedback loop? Because I've seen a lot of people have goals allegedly, but then there's just like, oh yeah, we put it on a piece of paper at the beginning of the year, and let me go dust it off. It's like unless you're looking at it on a weekly, I look at our goals on a daily basis. We use Google Sheets internally for everything. We're HubSpot certified and all that jazz, but I still like my sheets. It just looks sexier for me. And I'm looking at my goals on a daily basis. We update everything in HubSpot, but I personally look at all my goals on a Google Sheet every single day. I've got them plastered right here on my TV.
From the stop doing perspective, and what should agencies start doing? Maybe it's the reverse of stop doing, but What should they start doing?
Well, I think yes, the reverse of the stop doing, but I think I think I would actually want to double click on the intentionality component, with being honest with yourself as to why a sale may or may not occur. And so I had a former employee, Alex. Jeremy, you met Alex, right? Alex, good peoples. Alex would always talk about a pre-mortem, right? So a lot of people talk about a post-mortem, like after the death. It's like, hindsight's 20/20, but it doesn't really help you much on that deal. So Alex loved doing a pre-mortem. Alex was a lot smarter than me. Alex was a nerd, but like he just a data guy, right? And so he was always in the pre-mortem, and he's just like, "Why is this deal going to go wrong?" Like he was just a negative Nancy, as you can. I loved it because he just would. Sales guys would come in all excited, and then he was the exact opposite of filling them full of piss and vinegar. He would just deflate the living hell out of them. And Alex would be like, "Okay, why would this deal die? This deal's going to die because of this and this and this and this reason, and then this is going to happen," and just. That's something that you really need to start doing. So when you're submitting a proposal, when you're submitting an RFP, stop sitting in your comfort zone. And it was what was ultimately helpful for him to understand that, like, okay, how do I differentiate myself? How do I actually turn this around in a way in which it's actually going to help? And so I just think that more people need to start asking themselves those honest questions of, okay, how do I differentiate myself? If I've just put case studies in there, that's not going to be enough because my case study is really good, but their case study is also going to be really good. What's that narrative that we've got? So again, sitting down and being honest with yourself about why would you win a deal? Why would you lose a deal?
I want to talk about I mentioned you formerly served as CRO of a digital marketing agency. They went from 2.5 to 40 million during your tenure. So I want to talk about some of the things that you helped implement. We won't have enough time to really. One of the things I find fascinating about you is, you've been in the trenches for many, many years, including selling life insurance. I think door to door, building over 50-person sales team. So we won't get to talk about those war stories, although I would love to at some point. Let's talk about CRO and when you were CRO of the digital marketing agency, and what were some of the things that you saw help put in place, and maybe some lessons along the way.
A lot. I mean, my time as a CRO, I was fortunate enough to serve under a really strong CEO. A lot of the understanding about leadership that I have today, if not most, comes from him. And there was a lot that I learned about managing people from my time in insurance, because it was constantly about herding cats. But when it came to leading, which are two separate things, I learned as a CRO at the agency. And I would say the two biggest things that I learned, and I think I've briefly touched on them already, but it's one is holding people accountable. And two, how you do that is through the second way, is having direct conversation with people. A lot of times we shy away from those direct conversations because it's uncomfortable, and we don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to make someone else feel uncomfortable. But again, I always ask myself, what is my role as a leader, and would it be irresponsible of me to allow this madness to continue? And the answer always is yes. And so, right, like leadership's not a role, a position. It's an action. And so, are you acting like a leader? And just because you can tell yourself you're a leader, if you're not acting like one, well, you're not. And then that stems into your culture. I have a very unique perspective and take on culture. I'm not one of these rah, everyone needs to feel good, we're a family type of guy. Absolutely. I'm the exact opposite, if anything. But I think culture is wildly critical to the growth of any sort of organization, the sustainability of an organization. And so culture is not a set of beliefs or words or core values. And I'm not trying to say that those things are not important, but that's not culture. Culture is your actions, right? And that's what Ben Horowitz says all the time, is it's who you are, is how you act is who you are. And so I think that's probably the biggest two key takeaways that I have is, Anything about leadership is all about accountability. It's about having direct and difficult conversations, because if everyone could do it, then everyone could be a leader. That and being growth minded, bro. Not enough people are growth minded. This world is filled with fixed mindset people. It's unbelievable. I have never heard somebody say, "Yep, I'm fixed mindset." Everyone will be like, "Yeah, I'm growth mindset." But are you? Are you? How do you take criticism? How do you take criticism? Where does your brain instantly go? And I'll tell you this, man. It's rare to meet people that are growth minded, because a growth minded person does not care about what they're doing right. A growth minded person only cares about what they're doing wrong. So when somebody criticizes you, what's your instant reaction? Is your instant reaction telling them about the time? "Oh yeah, I did that one time. Oh yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah, this. Oh yeah, that." Or is your instant reaction asking deeper questions about, "Okay, but hang on, why? Okay, well, how would you do it?" That's a growth minded person, not the person that says, "You know what? You're right. And in fact, I do that too." Constantly, I'm giving people feedback. I'm like, "Hey, why did you say that? Like, you shouldn't have positioned it that way." "Oh yeah, no, I'm like, "Oh yeah, so this just happened to be the one time you chose not to do it." "Yeah, I believe that." Hey, get out of here, man. Like, we're talking about money here. Like, how does it, what do your feelings have to do with this? Just grow up, be an adult.
What else happened that you helped with from that in that tenure that other agencies should be doing as well?
Positioning and differentiation. Those are vitally critical. If you know everything I know about positioning, I learned from Al Reese, Rory Sutherland, and Dave Trott. They've got wonderful books. So Rory Sutherland's book, Alchemy, Strongest Just Pick It Up. Al Reese's and Jack Trout's book on positioning, Strongest Just You Pick It Up. And then anything by Dave Trott. Start with, what's it called? Predatory Thinking. Those are wonderful books. So positioning, it's not what you do to a product, rather it's what you do to the mind of a prospect. That's what Al Reese would always say. So it's how can you position something? So it's not enough for you to say, "We are the best. This is great. We produce this, that, and the third. Our team cares." Nobody cares. Literally, nobody cares. You are annoying people and you're embarrassing yourself. And I have to have that strong language in order to shake people to stop it. Nobody cares. Stop telling people about your team. Stop telling people about the results you get. Nobody cares until they do. That's when they need it, is when they're ready to post-rationalize. Everything before them is about them, and it's about how you're going to emotionally evoke reaction. So that's what you need to be fixated on. That's what your differentiator needs to be fixated on. And then so positioning then leads to differentiating. And I'll give you this nugget for free. Here's my litmus test on whether or not your differentiator is good or is. Can I swear?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, whether or not your differentiator is shit. Would anyone else ever say the opposite? Because if not, it's not a differentiator. So, for example, if I asked you, "Hey, why would I choose your agency versus agency B?" "Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking us." And a lot of people ask us this, blah, 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 blah. One of the reasons why you should choose us is because of our team. Our team is wonderful. We've sourced excellent candidates from all across the country, et cetera, et cetera, and the results we get. Oh, and my team, we care, and the culture we built, and bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Don't nobody care. Is anyone else going to say you should choose us because we have an awful team? We don't get results. None of my team cares. And you, good luck. No one's going to say that. So saying the opposite of that is not true, is not going to move the needle. So stop it. Right? This is where you can insert that Michael Jordan meme where he's talking about telling kids not to do drugs. Stop it. Get some help. Just stop it.
Ali, first of all, I know we're at time here. I want to be the first one to thank you. I don't know if there's, I wrote a couple things down. If there's any other books or resources that you'd recommend, but I wrote down a really good one, Crucial Conversations. Yes. I actually had the author on, Joseph Grinny. The Carol Dweck book on growth mindset you mentioned a bunch with Al Reese and Jack Trout. Predatory Thinking. There's another one, Don't Get Mad at Penguins by Gabe Karp, which is really good about not avoiding those hard conversations. Any others really quickly, because I know you got to run.
Radical Candor.
Radical Candor. Yeah. Cool. And then yours as well.
Yeah, if you want to check it out. Predictable Closing and Radical Leadership.
Ali, thank you so much. Everyone check out rosegardenconsulting.com and contact Ali if you have questions. Ali, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.